Erev Tov. Good evening. We'll just give it a moment. I know we're waiting for my rabbinic colleagues to join us, but this is a good reminder that now's the time to be present, to turn off our distractions, things that might take us away from being in the moment. So if you have a phone, I'll encourage you to please silence it or turn it off completely. We'll be together for about 45, 50 minutes.
Thank you.
And we will begin in melody as we love to do here at Temple Beth Elohim. And I hope that you'll join. Ooh.
Erev Tov, everybody. Good evening. It's so meaningful that you are all here this evening as we mark Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm so grateful to members of our 6th and 7th grade cohort who are here this evening. Some of you are presenting and sharing your projects in this space and on the screen, and all of you have presentations out in the atrium. And so we'll share a little bit more about their projects and what they mean for our community, and we'll hear from Eliana, our Director of K-7 Learning, in a little while. Our tradition teaches us to zachor, to remember. We remember every single day we say these words. We say these words at the end of Shema when we remember our leaving Egypt. We remember because we are a people, a remembering people. That is a part of our role in the world. It is part of the continuation of Torah that we teach in this world. And so I'm grateful that we're all together to create a deep sense of remembrance on this truly important and meaningful day to mark in the year cycle of our people. And so we're going to begin together on page 500, actually with the words on the screen. 577.
Shir lamalot esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz Salitain lamot raglecha al yanum shomrecha hine lo yanum velo ishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha Al yad yeminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka
וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. מעתה ועד עולם.
Page 521. We begin with silence, the silence of death, the silence after destruction. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved black of space about us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night, no messenger to tell the full tale. There is only silence, the silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences. Page 522. Let's read together as we prepare to light our 6 memorial candles. We kindle these lights in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. Zichronam livracha. So we would like to honor our 6th grade students who are here to light these memorial candles. We're so proud that they are the lights to carry forward the memory of those who perished tonight. So 6th graders, come on forward.
One of the students in our program, along with their extraordinary teachers, Julia and Eliana. If you're a member of our 7th grade, come on up too.
Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam.
Let's read together these words from front of us, age 14 from Teresian. Together, I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even if I am suppressed, I will always come back to life.
So I am grateful to Eliana Stein, our Director of K-7 Learning, who's going to share a little bit about these projects that you'll see on the screen and outside in our atrium.
Hi, everybody. I am so proud to introduce the work that our 6th and 7th grade students have been working on during religious school. The work presented in the atrium represents 3 different projects that the students have been working on. First, our students met with a local artist named Rachel Cerati, who told the story of her grandmother's survival of the Holocaust and the importance of continuing to tell the stories of our ancestors. Students then use different mediums to tell this story and to begin to think about how they want to tell their own stories. Next, our educators worked with the students to tell them about the Holocaust and the resilience of the Jewish people. Our students each chose a Holocaust survivor and created posters to educate one another about a variety of stories and different ways that people survived this challenging time. Finally, our students had the opportunity to figure out how they wanted to tell a Jewish folktale or another meaningful story from our history. They chose a variety of storytelling methods, from scrapbooking to creating Minecraft worlds to posters and more. They tell stories of resilience, survival, and strength. I'm excited to introduce 2 of our students to share a little bit more about their projects, Zach and Josh.
Okay, wait, can I start?
Yeah.
Okay, this story is about my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather had false papers to hide his Jewish identity, but he was arrested anyways for being in the French Resistance in 1944. He was put in a temporary camp. He knew he was most likely going to die if he didn't escape, so he managed to get a knife and hide it in his shoe. As he was going on a train to a concentration camp, he had some other prisoners broke the window of the train and jumped out. He hurt his ankle after jumping, which made it impossible for him to run. He heard gunshots behind him and found out that the person who jumped after him was shot and dead. He searched for help and came upon a farm. The people at the farm would not let him stay because it was too risky, but they gave him food and told him where he could find a family who could help him. It took him a day to get to the family because of his injuries. Upon arrival at their house, they took him in and told him he was lucky because if he got there any sooner, the Nazis would have killed him because they came a day before, so his injuries saved him life. This story means a lot to me because if my great-grandfather hadn't survived, I wouldn't be alive to tell the story. It also shows how strong he was and how much he fought for his survival. Thank you.
Zach, thank you. As we think about, I want to call Josh Edlow forward to come take a seat up here. And as we think about the power of importance of memory and sacred telling, we offer these words of Ani Ma'amin, I believe.
Ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin. Be'emuna shelema, be'emuna shelema, ve'af al pi she'itmameya, im kol ze ani ma'amin, ve'af al
Welcome. My name is Josh Shedlow, and I'm a 6th grader at TBE, and I'm having my bar mitzvah in October this year. For my project, I chose to tell the story of Judah Samet because his story is very inspirational. He survived 2 major events that were examples of horrible anti-Semitism: the Holocaust and the Pittsburgh Tree of Life shooting. I'd like to tell you Judah's story and why I think he is such a remarkable and resilient person. He was born on February 5th, 1938 in Hungary and was sent to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Germany in 1944. In April 1945, he was taken out of the concentration camp, and he and his family thought they would be killed, but they were liberated by American soldiers on a train. This was an unexpected event that saved over 2,000 Jewish lives. After he survived the Holocaust, he served in the Israeli military before moving to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1960, where he worked at a high-end jewelry store. Samet spoke in many places about surviving the Holocaust and was energized by the reception his speeches received. On October 27, 2018, Judah was 4 minutes late to synagogue due to a conversation with his housekeeper and arrived at the Tree of Life synagogue at the same time as the shooter. He was right next to an active firefight between the police and the shooter, and luckily he survived. Despite experiencing another terrifying act of anti-Semitism, Judah continued to express a hopeful perspective about humanity. A year after the shooting, Samet said, "I have the right to believe the world is a rotten place, but I don't. I find this spirit of optimism in the face of hate to be a powerful reminder of hope for a better world." Judah Samet died of stomach cancer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 2022 at the age of 84. His story is a shining example of bravery and shows the importance of fighting against anti-Semitism. Thank you for this opportunity to share my project and to honor the bravery and persistence of Judah Samet.
Josh, thank you. Zach, thank you. And I just want to once again thank all of our 6th and 7th graders for working so hard on their projects that I hope that you will take time to look at in the atrium.
I'm just reminded a little bit about also being in 6th grade and 7th grade when I learned of older kids taking a trip called the March of the Living. And we have congregants on a delegation right now doing this really powerful walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau, wearing bright blue jackets, showing that there is life where there was once death. And you are helping to connect us to this one human tapestry by reminding us of our history, by continuing on to learn and tell these stories. Hopefully one day you can bear witness to in person and remember that we are all connected. Rikma enoshit achat.
כשאמות משהו ממני, משהו ממני ימות בך, ימות בך. כשתמות משהו ממך בי, משהו ממך בי ימות איתך, ימות איתך, כי כולנו, כן כולנו, כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה, ואם אחד מאיתנו הולך מעימנו, משהו מת בנו, משהו נשאר איתו. אם נדע איך להרגיע את האיבה, אם רק נדע, אם נדע להשקיט את זעמנו על אף עלבוננו, לומר סליחה, להתחיל מההתחלה, כי כולנו, כן כולנו, כולנו רקמה אנושית אחת חיה. ואם אחד מאיתנו הולך מעימנו, אז משהו מת בנו, משהו נשאר איתו.
This time, I want to invite us all to rise as we're able, as we offer traditional words of memory and blessing, El Malei Rachamim, which you can find on page 530.
El Malei Rachamim, shochein במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות 6 מיליון אחינו ואחותינו שנהרגו על קידוש השם. בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור ביצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters and siblings murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated. So this evening, it is my honor to introduce Jody Kipnis, a visionary leader, an educator, and advocate whose work reminds us that history is not something we simply remember, but something we are responsible for carrying forward. Jody is the co-founder, president, and CEO of the Holocaust Legacy Foundation, where she leads transformative efforts to confront anti-Semitism, strengthen democratic values, and empower young people to act with moral courage. Her work is guided by a deeply personal commitment she made in 2018, standing on the grounds of Auschwitz when she pledged to a Holocaust survivor that she would help ensure the lessons of the Holocaust endure for future generations. That promise became action, and upon returning home, she founded the Holocaust Legacy Fellows Program, an immersive educational and travel experience for high school students, grounded in her belief that understanding history is essential to shaping a more just and humane future. Jody recently was appointed to the Massachusetts Special Commission on Anti-Semitism in recognition of her leadership and moral clarity at this critical moment. She's a graduate of Northeastern University and earned a professional certificate in combating anti-Semitism from the Spertus Institute. And so, Jody, I'm grateful that you are here, long connected to our community as well, to share words with us about your really important work in the greater Boston area and beyond. Please welcome Jody Kipnis. And if you I want to make sure that everyone has a yellow card and a blue handout as well. Okay. If you don't have them, please raise your hand.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's really meaningful for me to be here at Temple Beth Elohim. This is a place where community, tradition, and reflection come together, especially as we approach Yom HaShoah. I stand here tonight not only as the co-founder of Holocaust Museum Boston, but as someone who sat in seats just like these. Actually, I sat in these seats. I was a member here in my children's middle school and high school years, even though I lived on the North Shore. They wanted to come to this synagogue, particularly because of their connection to Gann Academy. So I spent many years as a single mom focused on raising my children, building a life, and managing the day-to-day. Building a Holocaust museum was never part of my plan. And yet, life has a funny way of placing something in front of you, something that you can't ignore, and quietly asking, what are you going to do about it? Tonight, in this beautiful sanctuary, we are surrounded by memory, by names, by stories, by generations who prayed here before us and worried, as we do, about the world their children would inherit. That context matters for what I want to share with you this evening. And so tonight, as we gather in this space, surrounded by community, by history, by shared responsibility, I want to talk about why this Holocaust Museum matters right now. Before I go any further, you may have noticed, and as Rabbi Philip passed out those cards, the larger cards that were given to you, each card represents a different part of the museum, an experience, a story, and a question. And what I've found when we do this, it is something really interesting happens when we pass out these cards. People start looking at them. They start asking each other, what did you get? Then they begin sharing. And without even realizing it, something in the room shifts. You're no longer just listening to a talk about a museum. You're already participating in it, because this museum is not designed to be experienced alone. It is meant to spark conversation, to create connection, to make people think, and to turn to the person next to them and say, what did you think? That is how learning deepens. It is how perspective expands, and that is how a group of individuals become a community. Every exhibit in the museum is designed that way, not just to tell you what happened, but to ask you to reflect, to respond, and to see yourself in the history. So let me get back to this museum and why it matters right now. When people hear that Boston is building a Holocaust museum, I'm often asked two questions, sometimes thoughtfully and sometimes with a bit of hesitation. Why do we need a Holocaust museum now? And why Boston? After all, hasn't enough time passed? Haven't we learned lessons? I wish the answer was yes. The Holocaust did not begin with killing in camps. It began quietly, with language, with laws, with the erosion of norms, with people convincing themselves that what they were witnessing was temporary, political, or someone else's responsibility. It unfolded in a society that was educated, modern, and deeply confident in itself. I am not saying any of this to provoke fear, but to remind us that democracy does not fail all at once. It weakens gradually, especially when people assume it cannot happen to them. Today, we are living in a moment where memory itself is being contested in many ways that never us expected to see again. Young people, often well-intentioned, are encountering distortion, oversimplification, and denial before ever encountering historical understanding. So when we ask ourselves, why now? The answer is not that the Holocaust has suddenly become relevant again. The answer is that education matters most before history repeats its worst patterns. And I want to be clear about something gently but honestly. When we talk about why now, it is impossible to ignore the world we are living in right now. Before I go further, I want to name something that matters in a community like this one. I know there are people in this room who see the world differently, politically, ideologically, and generationally. What I'm talking about today isn't about any one party, position, or moment. It's about values, human dignity, moral responsibility, and the obligation to remember what happens when those are eroded. Holocaust education belongs to all of us precisely because it asks us to think more deeply and not to agree more easily. Anti-Semitism today does not always look the way people expect it to look. It is not always overt. It often disguises itself as distortion, selective outrage, or the quiet erasure of Jewish history from larger conversations. Many of us in this room have felt it, not only in what is said, but in what suddenly feels acceptable to say out loud. And for the first time in a long time, many Jews are realizing that safety cannot be assumed. It has to be protected and often explained. What concerns me most is not any single incident or headline. It's how quickly complexity disappears, how easily history is flattened. Sorry, that's my North Shore accent coming out. And how fast disagreement slips into dehumanization. That pattern is not new. It is one the past knows very well. And that's why Holocaust education cannot be reactive. It cannot wait until moral lines have already collapsed. It must give people the tools early to recognize the language as it shifts, when empathy narrows and when silence begins to feel easier than a response. Because the Holocaust did not happen because people did not know better. It happened because too many people decided they did not need to know at all. For me, this is not an abstract question. In 2018, I traveled to Poland and visited Holocaust sites, places I hadn't even studied, read about, or even understood. And yes, I went to Hebrew school. And that wasn't because the Holocaust wasn't present in my education. It definitely was. But my earliest exposure came very young, before I was even a teenager. We were shown stark, black and white footage of liberation, images of emancipated bodies, and mass death were offered without context, without preparation, without framework to understand what we were seeing at that age. It was truly frightening. And for many of us, it shut something down rather than opening understanding. And for me, for many years until I traveled in 2018 to Auschwitz. But at that age, we didn't have the language or emotion tools to process it. So instead of learning more, many of us avoided it. Not out of indifference, but out of overwhelm. What stayed with me for many years was fear, not comprehension. What we weren't taught, at least not then, was how this began, or how ordinary life slowly adjusted itself to brutality. We did not learn about the early phase of the Holocaust, when Jewish communities were murdered through mass shootings in forests, fields, and ravines across Eastern Europe, carried out near people's homes before many camps were even fully operational. Nor did we learn how propaganda, laws, and silence work together to make the unimaginable seem acceptable. Standing in Poland decades later, I realized something unsettling. How much had been missing. I didn't just feel grief, I felt clarity. I saw how ordinary the world had been, how systems were normalized, how people adjusted themselves incrementally to injustice. I kept asking myself a question that would not let go. At what point would I have understood that something fundamental had changed? Not when it was obvious, but when it was still explainable. When it was still debated, and when people were still telling themselves that this would pass. I didn't come home from that trip thinking I would build a museum. I came home knowing I wouldn't be able to unsee what I had seen. That realization made something very clear to me. Holocaust education cannot live in textbooks or memorial days. It must live in a permanent public space where people of all ages encounter it not as a distant history, but as a mirror that asks difficult, necessary questions about society and about themselves. That was the moment this museum stopped being an idea and became a responsibility. That was the moment that we knew the responsibility had to grow, and it grew into shared effort with many people committed to ensuring this museum could exist. We are building Holocaust Museum Boston not as a monument to tragedy, but as a living educational institution. The Holocaust Museum Boston was founded not only to preserve history, but to place Holocaust education in the civic and moral heart of the city, where democratic ideals were first tested and articulated. The museum will guide visitors through the historical arc of the Holocaust, grounded in facts, context, and testimony, but just as importantly, it will explore how it happened. Visitors will encounter exhibits that examine the fragility of democracy, the role of propaganda and misinformation, how ordinary people became complicit, and how silence and bystanding allow injustice to grow. There are spaces within the museum dedicated to survivor testimony, so voices are heard not as abstractions, but as lived experiences. One of the most important spaces in the museum is our testimony theater. It's designed to slow people down, to allow visitors to sit, listen, and be present with a survivor's voice without distraction. In our Dimensions in Testimony Theater, in partnership with Steven Spielberg's USC Shoah Foundation, visitors will encounter a life-size holographic presentation of recorded survivor testimonies that feels conversational and immediate. Survivors spent days answering hundreds of real questions so that future generations can engage with their words and experiences directly. As we move into a time when fewer survivors are able to speak in person, that encounter will matter. It ensures the testimony remains human, intentional, and rooted in lived experience, and is met with attention, dignity, and care. There are many other interactive elements throughout the museum that ask visitors to reflect on moral choice, not by telling them what to think, but by asking them to think deeply. And there are exhibits focused on courage, on individuals who refused to participate, who acted quietly, imperfectly, but decisively. Visitors will encounter people like Miep Geis, who chose not to look away, who risked her life to hide the Frank family because she believed that doing nothing was not an option. They will stand in front of Chuni Sugihara and Aristides de Souza Mendez, who defied their own governments and issued thousands of visas, knowing it would cost them their careers. They will hear voices, the voice of Sophie Scholes, a university student who believed truth was more important than her own safety, and she paid for her life with it. And they will wrestle with the complicated story of Oskar Schindler, a flawed businessman who began as an opportunist and became a rescuer, saving more than thousands of lives. They will hear from Wait Still and Martha Sharp, a Unitarian minister and social worker from Massachusetts, who left their young children behind to travel to Nazi-controlled Europe and help rescue refugees because they believed that faith required them to do so. What unites all of them is not perfection. It is not power. It is not certainty. It is a decision. What unites, a decision to act, a decision to use their influence they had, however small it was, a decision to protect someone when protection was dangerous, a decision to interrupt cruelty even when the system around them rewarded compliance. Moral courage is rarely loud. It is often lonely. It is almost always costly. But history shows us something extraordinary. The future does not belong only to the powerful. It belongs to the people who choose. These life-size, three-dimensional historical figures that I spoke about are embedded within a giant mirrored surface. As the visitor listens to their words and stories, they will see themselves next to this historical figure as a reflection beside them. The design is intentional. It allows each visitor to stand face to face with moral courage and consider the value of a human life. And then the question we will place on every visitor: when your moment comes, and it will come, what will you choose? One space in the museum that does something very simple and very powerful. It walks visitors through how democracy erodes step by step. Visitors encounter real propaganda, changing laws, and shifting languages, not all at once in the museum, but gradually throughout. Each moment in its own can seem understandable, even reasonable. And only after moving through these choices and sequences do visitors realize something unsettling. There was no single moment where everything collapsed. It happened through accumulation, through normalization, through silence. That experience is especially important for young people. It shows that history is not only driven by villains, it is shaped by ordinary decisions made when values are tested. This museum will not end in 1945. It asks visitors to carry these lessons forward into how they see one another, how they see themselves, how they engage in civic life, and how they respond when moral courage is required. So why Boston? Boston is a city built on courage and the ideals of democracy, debate, dissent, and civic responsibility. The museum will stand across from Boston's historic Freedom Trail, offering a powerful view of the State House. That proximity is intentional because this museum is deeply rooted in Jewish history. It does not stop there. It examines what happens when democratic systems fail to protect human dignity and what it takes to defend them. Boston is also a city of education. Students come here from all around the world to learn how to think, how to lead, and how to question. Placing Holocaust education here ensures these lessons reach people at formative moments before assumptions harden, before indifferences settle in. There is another reason why this museum matters here in Wellesley and throughout the greater Boston community. Survivors built their lives here, raised families here, sat in sanctuaries like this one. Many carried their stories, not because they forgot, because they hoped the world would not need to hear them. We are now reaching a moment when survivor voices are no longer physically with us. That reality places responsibility on each and every one of us in this room. This museum ensures that when living memory fades, moral clarity does not. So before I close, I want to take a moment together. When you walked into here tonight, we handed out some of those yellow cards, if everyone can take one of those out. On that card is the name of a child, one child, among 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered during the Holocaust. A name, an age, a life. Because one of the most dangerous things that happens over time is that numbers replace people. 6 million becomes a number, but a name is a person. So I'm going to ask you that we all have our cards out, and together as one community, we will read the card out loud so that this room is filled not with numbers, but with names. So if everybody's ready, all together. Today we observe Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. We remember the 6 million Jewish people who were murdered during the Holocaust, including the 1.5 Jewish children. One of those children was Adele Adler, age 6. Today we say their name. When we say a name, we honor a life. We remember that behind every child, name was a child with a family, a voice, and a future that was stolen. On Yom HaShoah, we say their names so they are not forgotten. We say their name to stand against anti-Semitism and hatred. We say their name to remind ourselves of our responsibility to care for one another and to build a more just world. Thank you. That is what memory looks like. Not abstract, not distant, but human. So before I jump off or get pulled off off of the bimah, let me briefly just return to the question that I was asked at the beginning. Why now? Because forgetting has consequences. Why Boston? Because democracy must be examined and defended where it is most deeply cherished. And why a museum like this? Because memory, when paired with education, moral courage, remains the strongest tool we have to shape a more just and safe future for the Jewish people. And that idea, memory paired with responsibility, is not new. It is rooted in our tradition. In the Torah, we are taught, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. It is a simple command, but a demanding one, because it reminds us that awareness is not enough, that memory is not passive, that knowing must lead to action. As we approach Yom HaShoah, as we are reminded of that in another way, we remember not only the loss, but resistance. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, when Jews chose dignity and courage, even when the outcome was uncertain. Not because they believed they would win, but because they believed that standing by was not an option. So if anything that I've said tonight resonates with you, and if you find yourself continuing to think about some of the questions that I've asked or what you've seen on your cards, I hope you'll stay connected to the work that we are doing. Come see the museum when it opens, bring your children, your grandchildren, experience it for yourself and be part of it. Be a volunteer. Because this is not something that I am building, it is something that we are all building together as a community. And ultimately the question is not only what happened then, the question is, what will we do with what we know now? Thank you, everybody.
Jody, thank you so much for sharing and for your work to create this really important piece of memory and education in the life of our city. So thank you so much. We're going to turn to conclude our ritual this evening with words of Mourner's Kaddish. As we said a name, we speak these names aloud. I want to invite us to rise on page 533 as we recite this Kaddish Yom HaShoah, a Mourner's Kaddish that was specifically prepared for Yom HaShoah that Elie Wiesel offered, of blessed memory, offered to us. So let us read responsibly. You can find the words on the screen or on page 533. Yit Kadal,
Auschwitz,
V'yit Kadash,
Rosh,
Shemei Rabbah,
Ponar,
Bi'alma Divra Chirute,
Babi Yar,
V'yamlich Malchute,
Majdanek,
B'chayechon Uv'yomechon,
Birkenau,
Uv'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael,
Kovno,
Ba'agala Uv'izman Kariv,
Yanovska.
V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Ulamei Omaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach.
Theresienstadt,
V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam.
Buchenwald,
Vitnase vitadar,
Treblinka,
vitale vitalal,
Vilna,
Shemei de kudsha brichu,
Bergen-Belsen,
le'ela,
Mauthausen,
min kol birchata v'shirata,
Dachau,
tushbechata v'nechemata,
Minsk,
da'amiran bi'alma,
Warsaw.
v'imru amen.
Yehi
Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen.
Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom,
Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol
Israel.
Zichronam livracha, may their memories forever be a blessing. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank our 6th and 7th graders for being here, for Zach and Josh for speaking and sharing this evening. I want to just make mention that our colleague, Rabbi Jordy Kallman, is not feeling well tonight, and Rabbi Sistenwein had to leave early to attend a Shiva Minyan this evening as well. I want to just say that a number of years ago, we had a program called Rescuing Hope, which is an intergenerational course that connected conversations between teens and adults around combating anti-Semitism, around Jewish identity, and the ways in which we build bridges and relationships. And one of the things that was created out of that was a special page on our website called Rescuing Hope. If you go to our TBE website and you click on Lifelong Learning, in the drop-down it says Rescuing Hope, and there you can see stories, many stories of people in our community who have connections to survivors of the Holocaust. And so it was a really meaningful project. I want to thank Saul Nathanson for his help in spearheading that, Mark Laufer for your help in helping to encourage that along as well. And if anybody has stories that they want to share, I know Saul is interested in expanding that project as well. So thank you everybody for being here this evening. Erev Tov.
Erev Tov.